Hi everybody, and welcome to a new Cloud Academy webinar. I am Andrea. I'm the head of content strategy here at Cloud Academy, and I am your host today for this webinar, together with our two distinguished guests, Karen McDaniel and Praveen Rasia, respectively, Product Marketing Manager and Senior Product Manager at Imperva. Hello and welcome, Karen and Praveen. Thanks very much for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
So today we talk about security in the cloud. Imperva is one of the biggest players in the field. Actually, it is the only leader in the 2013 Magic Quadrant for Web Application Firewalls by Gartner. So it was better than them to talk about security. It's a complex issue. Security is a very complex issue that any company needs to take seriously to protect its own data and its customers' data. It's also a quite wide and broad topic with many facets, many different problems to tackle. So in this webinar, Karen and Praveen will help us better understand the cyber threats from a cloud point of view, showing us why firewalls and IPSs fall short and why web application firewall technologies like Imperva SecureSphere are the right approach to protect a cloud infrastructure and your application. But I don't want to steal a minute more to our guests because the argument is so important and engaging. But first, I want to remind you all that you can start asking questions right now in the chat. I'll pick the best ones for the question and answer session that we will have in the end. So, Carrie, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Karen McDaniel. I'm on the Imperva product team, and with me I have our product manager, Praveen, who will be on to help answer any maybe more technical questions that anyone has during today's session. So today's presentation is an introduction to Imperva's Web Application Firewall for applications that are being run on Amazon Web Services. We'll start this presentation by talking briefly about Imperva and what we do as a company. Then I'll talk about the number of data breaches that we've seen in recent years and how traditional technology stacks up against today's advanced cyber attacks. And we'll also introduce you to the capabilities of WAF technology. At Imperva, we're seeing that a lot of our customers are moving their web applications to the cloud. So I'm going to talk a bit about why organizations are doing this and also about our SecureSphere Web Application Firewall, or WAF, for AWS, which, like Andrea mentioned, is the only Gartner Magic Quadrant leader for web application firewall. And to finish up, I'll talk briefly about a test drive for our SecureSphere WAF that you can go ahead and try out on your own. So I'll talk a bit about the use cases that we're showcasing in our AWS test drive. So with that, I'd like to jump into a bit about Imperva as a company and what it is that we're focused on. At Imperva, we see that businesses spend a lot of money on security, and despite that, breaches are still happening every day. We're seeing this because threats and attackers have vastly evolved over the past decade, but we're seeing the investments in security technology from organizations really hasn't evolved that much. We used to see that viruses and amateur hackers were the main problems, and being able to block these types of intruders with endpoint and network security was sufficient. But things have changed, and today's enterprises are more open, they're functioning more and more online, and this gives almost anyone help-yourself access to the assets in the data center. We're seeing that governments, organized criminals, and hacktivists have really displaced these pranksters, and they're targeting critical applications and data with very sophisticated, very frequent, and large-scale attacks. And despite that, organizations are still using solutions that were really designed for yesterday's big problems. Endpoint and network defenses are very much strained by the new realities we're seeing, and we really do see proof in the headlines. Despite major investments in the latest antivirus, intrusion prevention systems, and next-generation firewalls, organizations are getting hacked every day. We recently have heard a lot about, Home Depot and JP Morgan Chase and other organizations that are experiencing these advanced attacks. Other industry experts also acknowledge that network security solutions like next-generation firewalls are necessary. Of course, they're part of the security portfolio, but they're really insufficient. So at Imperva, we view endpoint and network security as the first and second pillars of enterprise security, but you can't conduct business safely without the third pillar, which is data center security. Rather than trying to secure devices or networks, data center security adds a layer of protection in the data center that directly surrounds your web applications and data assets like your file storage systems and your databases that are very vulnerable to attack, data theft, and fraud. So we believe this is what organizations must have in a time where web applications open your data center up to everyone, and modern threats are coming from both outside and inside the organization. Over half of all organizations have experienced a web application breach in the past year, and the majority of these incidents led to severe financial losses for the targeted companies. Pretty much every security professional has read the news stories, from the wave of hacktivist attacks that took place in 2011 that brought down, dozens of corporate and government sites. We saw DDoS attacks in 2012 that disabled major U.S. banking sites, and there's also there were also several massive web breaches that resulted in millions of compromised passwords and credit card numbers and other types of personally identifiable information. In these cases, hackers very easily moved around network security defenses like firewalls and IPS systems to take down very popular websites. Since web applications are an essential part of business operations, it's important to protect them because they are also a top target for attack. Web attacks like SQL injection and cross-site scripting are, commonly used in some of the most major security breaches that we've seen. And you can see in this chart here that 2012 is a record year, and overall this is trending upward. Like I mentioned, the threat landscape has changed dramatically over the past decade, from pranksters to very sophisticated operations. Today, governments, the first one here, are seriously engaging in cyber espionage, and that's resulting in the loss of intellectual property and other types of valuable data that keeps companies competitive. They're motivated by policy, politics, and nationalism typically, and they generally will use targeted attacks, which we sometimes refer to as APT, as their preferred method. Organized crime uses some of the exact same method, targeted attacks in particular, but they have different motivations. They're typically financially motivated, and they have learned from the government and cyber espionage organizations how to be more effective in their attacks. So we're seeing a lot of targeted attacks from organized crime and also a lot of fraud. The motivation for hacktivists is almost always political or ideological. Their primary method of attack is usually a targeted attack that they use to steal embarrassing data or jeopardize corporate infrastructure and then sort of release it or expose it out to the world. And if that fails, they move to another approach, which is denial of service, which is, one, method of attack that we've seen more and more. And sometimes they actually use DDoS first as a distraction technique for what really may be going on, what other types of attacks could be really going on in the background. When it comes to protecting your web applications from these kinds of threats, what we're showing here on this slide are critical defenses that are really required to prevent technical attacks, business logic attacks, and fraud. The most critical capability of any web application firewall is accuracy. There are some user activities that are obviously bad that need to be blocked. And there are also some activities that are clearly okay and should be allowed through. The hard part is dealing with that gray zone, things that aren't clearly bad or clearly good at first glance. So a WAF needs to be accurate, especially in this gray zone, so that it can stop hackers, but also let your customers, your partners, or your employees through. And the best way to deal with that gray area is by inspecting web application traffic at multiple layers and then correlating across those layers. If you think about technical attacks that exploit application vulnerabilities through methods like SQL injection and cross-site scripting, you need to be able to understand what's normal application activity and then what's considered unusual activity. And to do that, a WAF needs to learn applications by profiling use. And that learning needs to be ongoing because web applications are always changing, they're always evolving, so that learning needs to be dynamic. And that is what here we have dynamic profiling listed. That's what that provides. And of course, you also need to look for and stop known patterns of behavior using attack signatures. A WAF also needs to be able to identify when something is wrong with the HTTP mechanics, which can answer questions like, is someone tampering with the protocol, with the cookies? For example, is someone trying to hijack a user session? And again, to address technical attacks, you need to look at those layers and correlate across them. The same holds true for attacks on the business logic of applications via site scraping or comment spam or application level DDoS. And that's where it's important to have a WAF that has IP reputation awareness and also bot identification and mitigation capabilities so that it can recognize known malicious users or automated bots before they have a chance to either scrape your site content or perform an attack. And lastly here, WAF should help prevent fraud by detecting user devices that are infected with malware, that may be suspicious or have performed fraudulent transactions in the past. And correlating across all of these defensive layers using predefined and custom policies is what delivers that really accurate attack detection. Gartner started this conversation in 2013 with the release of its Magic Quadrant for network firewalls. In the report, they clearly state that next-generation firewalls are used to control external applications, and they make the distinction here that web application firewalls are used for organizations' critical internal web applications. So let's take a look at that same slide but in a different way, which shows here that if you compare WAF defenses to network security products like next-generation firewalls or IPS solutions, the differences here are pretty clear. First and foremost, these network security products don't have a dynamic profiling capability. And the critical point here is that this means that they don't have the ability to learn the elements or the expected usage of the application they're protecting. And if you're not doing that, these products typically suffer from a pretty high rate of false positives and negatives because they're relying on static signatures or known attacks. This means that they don't deal well with that gray area that I mentioned earlier. And if your security product isn't accurate, it's going to block legitimate users with false positives and let hackers pass with false negatives. By relying heavily on signatures like these devices do, it also means that they're susceptible to signature evasion techniques like encoding and enumeration, which can really elude their signature pattern. And then in addition to that, they don't offer cookie or session protection. They're not able to stop business logic attacks like site scraping, brute force, and comment spam. And they're not able to prevent web fraud. And then lastly, they don't have the ability to offer powerful correlation engines that can accurately stop SQL injection, cross-site scripting, or other types of advanced cyber attacks. And in fact, a lot of other WAF vendors don't offer these either, and their WAFs are considered inferior as a result. One way to get a really good sense of what customers are facing out there is to look at the OWASP top 10. The Open Web Application Security Project, also known as OWASP, their top 10 report represents the most critical web application security risks, and these risks are identified by a very broad consensus of web application security experts from around the world. And the OWASP Top 10 has become a de facto standard for web application security across the globe. So their report for 2013 showed that the top 10 risks include SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and cross-site request forgery as some examples. So if you were to put next-generation firewalls and IPS systems to the test, you'll see that they only address and only partially 40% of this list, which leaves a significant gap that's really exposing businesses to breaches and brand damage, and the mitigation of these things is very costly. Only a web application firewall can fully address 100% of the most critical risks that are shown here and that are faced by web applications. So one example of a dangerous gap in enterprise web application security is shown here in the OWASP threat number 2, which is broken authentication and session tampering. So here, hackers modify the parameters encoded in an application's URL, and they're doing that so that they can hijack someone else's application session maliciously. And that's something that a WAF can detect and protect against, but it's invisible. This type of threat is invisible to next-generation firewalls and intrusion prevention systems. So hackers that are going after web applications have become more industrialized and well-armed. So they often launch the same attack repeatedly, and they do that across multiple target sites. And they do that using networks of remotely controlled bots. Threat intelligence comes into play in stopping these automated attacks and providing what we call an early warning system. So in our research here at Imperva, we found that it's common for a small group of attack sources to be responsible for the majority of attacks. So it's typically an 80-20 situation. 80% of the attack traffic across a range of websites is usually generated by 20% of the attackers, which is pretty significant. So if you can get your sites on attackers, especially these repeat offenders, you're going to have a lot of leverage in preventing attacks. The kind of threat intelligence that we have found most valuable is near real-time feeds that a WAF can leverage to augment what it's seeing firsthand. So for example, intelligence about the IP addresses of known attackers or the geographic location of users, and whether users are trying to hide their real IP address or if they're coming through an anonymizing service like the Onion router or Tor. If you can combine these elements together with other layers of attack detection, a WAF can respond even better to cyber threats. We also see tremendous value and potential in crowdsourcing threat intelligence. In our case, there's been a very positive network effect from our large installed base. And businesses using our WAF contribute to a community where they share their attack information, where we take it, we anonymize it, analyze it, and then add our own intelligence on top of it. And then what we do is we feed it back into our community members so that they can defend against emerging threats that are headed their way, which are typically coming from, maybe 20% of attackers. Gartner has continued their research on web application firewalls versus more traditional technology, and they put out a report dedicated to web application firewalls and the value that they bring to organizations. And again, here they differentiate web application firewall technology from more traditional technology, saying that WAF protects against the enterprise's customer web applications, protect the enterprise's customer-facing web applications against web attacks at a much more granular level. Now, when we think about web applications, it's easy to picture them being on premises. So this slide is interesting. I mentioned that Gartner recently released their Magic Quadrant for web application firewalls, which really proves what we talked about earlier. The SecureSphere WAF is the only solution featured in the leader category, and the leaders quadrant contains vendors that have had the ability to really shape the market by introducing additional capabilities in their offerings and by raising awareness of the importance of those features. And by being the first to do so, and our ability to meet enterprise requirements for the different use cases has placed us in this quadrant. So at Imperva, we see that organizations all over the world are migrating their IT infrastructure to the cloud, and it's pretty easy to see why. Cloud computing allows organizations to avoid the time and expense of building an on-premise data center. And when companies move to the cloud, they can deploy their applications faster, and they can scale their application deployments on demand, which accordingly lowers operational costs. For the same reasons that we talked about earlier, if your organization plans to move applications to the cloud, you also need to move your application defenses there too. And this is because web applications that are hosted in Amazon, they face the same security risks as on-premise applications. Most businesses recognize this risk and are looking for ways to secure their cloud infrastructure. By not migrating your security to the cloud, you expose your organizations to web attacks, data theft, and fraud. And sometimes we see that the cost savings that organizations hope to gain from cloud computing can quickly evaporate and become replaced by expensive breach investigation costs and downtime and potentially lawsuits. So one question that we get a lot is, doesn't Amazon provide application security? And the answer to this is that Amazon provides security groups or firewall technology for servers. Firewalls, like we mentioned, do not focus on web application security because they're deployed at the network perimeter. And just as the firewall that you have in your organization can stop a web application attack, the same holds true for the firewalls that Amazon is running for their public cloud. As a result, we've developed our industry-leading WAF to run on Amazon Web Services. SecureSphere for AWS combines multiple defenses to accurately pinpoint and block attacks without blocking your customers. And all of those critical capabilities like dynamic profiling technology, which automatically builds a whitelist of acceptable user behavior, is there. It's running natively on Amazon. And we also offer correlated attack validation to correlate dynamic profiling violations with other suspicious activities so that we can block attacks with precision and accuracy. Because our solution is specifically designed to leverage native AWS infrastructure capabilities, it not only delivers those superior WAF capabilities, but it also detects high bandwidth needs and can scale up or down as your organization experiences fluctuations in your application traffic volume. And the benefit here is that customers can quickly deploy us in the cloud and pay only for what they need without having to buy or maintain hardware. So let's talk now a bit more in depth about these key AWS capabilities. So by integrating with AWS technologies, it allows companies to really take advantage of all the benefits of cloud infrastructure. So for example, using CloudFormation and auto-scaling, organizations can quickly scale up or down as needed based on traffic. And we also leverage the Amazon CloudWatch to track the status of SecureSphere instances. So, for example, when CloudWatch detects problems like a sudden spike in throughput or maybe high CPU utilization, new SecureSphere server instances can be launched as needed. So companies can also use very simple JSON-based templates to define settings for AWS, like elastic load balancing, elastic IP, Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, S3, as well as import, export across availability zones and in different regions. So companies with these capabilities can rest assured that failover server instances will be rerouted to new physical sites. And because our WAF is native to AWS, SecureSphere can reroute traffic to different availability zones to support any disaster recovery plans that your company may have in place. So next what I'd like to do is talk about a customer that we have that has had a lot of success using our WAF running on AWS. And this customer, like a lot of companies that we see, they're taking a hard look at their data centers, and they often determine that it's more cost efficient to move their web applications to the cloud. So for this digital media and online gaming company, a move to the cloud made a lot of sense because they were anticipating a major product launch. They were expecting to sell 1 million units of their new gaming console, and they wanted to host their e-commerce and authentication applications in AWS. This had a lot of appeal to them, because in doing so, they could lean on the bandwidth, the scalability, and the ease of use of AWS rather than investing the time and money into upgrading their physical data centers. The company, though, had serious concerns about the security of their applications in a public cloud environment, especially with their upcoming high-profile product release. So for this organization's customers have pretty high expectations. Its online service needs to be reliable, highly available, but also secure. So delivering services in the cloud exposed the company to web attacks, and without question, they wanted ironclad defenses in place before they launched. Without protection for their AWS app, they wouldn't have been able to launch in time for the holiday season. So the company was using Imperva to protect its on-premise data center, and they knew that they wanted to use our technology in the cloud too. Because SecureSphere WAF supports CloudFormation templates, they were quickly and easily able to scale up to 120 gateways during the peak of the holiday season, and then they had the ability to scale right back down after that peak. And they were protected from SQL injection attacks that occurred right away during launch weekend. So by running SecureSphere for AWS, they were able to replace that upfront capital expense with low variable costs. They scaled the WAF across the globe with high availability without purchasing additional software or setting up any additional data centers to support their major release or to account for the increased holiday traffic. So they were able to increase their operational efficiency because by introducing AWS network, server, and storage abstractions, which really reduce the complexity of their environment. And with accelerated deployment capabilities, the team is able to manage their AWS environment with just 2 full-time employees, which allows it to cut costs and allows them to focus on other high-priority projects. So in contrast to upgrading the company's physical data centers to handle a product launch of this scale, which could take months, this solution gives companies, industry-leading WAF protection for applications in a matter of minutes. So here at Imperva, we're passionate about protecting organizations from all types of web threats, from malicious hackers and fraudsters and other bad actors, so that they can safely conduct their businesses online. The SecureSphere WAF helps protect businesses from threats like SQL injection, bots, known malicious sources, and requests from prohibited or maybe undesirable countries. And it provides protection for custom web applications that would otherwise go unprotected by technologies that guard only against known exploits and prevent vulnerabilities in off-the-shelf web application software. So overall, SecureSphere offers the most accurate and complete web application security available, and Imperva is continually researching emerging web threats to ensure that we can fully protect web applications today and in the future, which is why SecureSphere is the most trusted WAF in the world. So now that we've gone through an introduction of our SecureSphere WAF for AWS, I'd like to invite you to try our test drive on Amazon Web Services. And so you can take it for a free trial run, and you'll be able to see here the use cases that we showcase are protection against SQL injection and also zero-day threats, all while using native AWS functionality. So you can access this from the Amazon Marketplace or directly from the Imperva website. So if you would like to take it for a free trial, we would invite you to try it out.
Thank you very much, Carrie. It has been a great presentation, I think. Very good overview about the whole issue. I really enjoyed the part where you explained why this kind of technology are really important nowadays, and I enjoyed the second part too about the specific of your product. And I think our users liked it too. There are a couple dozens of questions so far. I will just pick the best ones because we are running out of time. Carrie, Praveen, you can choose which one of you wants to answer to those questions. The first one will be answered by me, by the way, because it's a question from a user who is concerned about joining the webinar just lately. No worries. We are recording this webinar. It will be available on Cloud Academy and on our YouTube channel as of tomorrow, probably. So everyone will be able to watch the whole webinar in case it joined lately. So the first question that I would like to pick and ask to our guests is from Andres, maybe I should say. And it is, how customizable SecureSphere is. For example, can I add whitelist IPs or play with VPNs and the like?
Could you repeat that question again? I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part.
Oh, sure. It is, how customizable SecureSphere is. For example, can I add whitelist IPs or play with VPN and the like?
Yeah, so from a web application firewall perspective and for SecureSphere, the policies that you create within SecureSphere are pretty flexible, very flexible in fact. So you can actually whitelist specific capabilities within SecureSphere. For example, whitelist IP addresses to allow specific IP addresses to go unhindered, while others will go through the policy mechanism to actually figure out if there is traffic that is malicious. So yes, we do have configuration that can help you whitelist specific IP addresses.
Nice feature, great to know. And another question from Chris, another interesting one, I think. Is it possible to do security auditing with SecureSphere?
Security auditing could mean a lot. So if there is one additional element of context that you can put into what security auditing means, that would really be helpful.
Yeah, indeed. I hope this user is still there. And if he's still there, he can explain the question. He can, and we can go through it again later on.
Let me take a hit.
Sure.
Let me do what we can do. Right? So, from a web application firewall perspective, we are essential for PCI. So, a lot of customers actually put us in front of their web applications that actually store PCI data, helps them to be PCI compliant. There is a specific requirement within the PCI DSS, which actually requires the web application firewall to be in front of web applications that store PCI or credit card kind of information. That may not actually answer the exact question, but we are the solution is built for protecting your data, which actually is stored within your web applications. Secondly, from a security audit perspective, there are multiple ways we can help with security audits. We work along with third-party web vulnerability scanners. So we work with the likes of HP and Senzik, Rapid7. These products actually scan your website to identify specific vulnerabilities within your website. Vulnerabilities like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and brute force attacks. They kind of scan your website and they kind of say, hey, these are the list of vulnerabilities that I found within your website. What SecureSphere actually does is that it allows you to actually import that vulnerability list from the vendor and automatically virtually patches those vulnerabilities. So we understand what the vulnerability is, where the vulnerability is happening, which parameter within the web application has the vulnerability, and we can actually go and write a virtual patch which automatically protects you against that vulnerability. So that also enables from a SDLC process perspective. An SDLC process means it's a security lifecycle, development lifecycle. So you're actually keeping security in mind when you actually do your code for applications. So we actually feed into that ecosystem by actually enabling the whole process of actually providing upfront mitigation for some of those vulnerabilities by just importing scan results from these web vulnerability scanners.
I see. It was a thorough answer. If Chris needs some more explanation about the answer, his question, he can probably just ask more in the question box. As you were speaking, I saw another very interesting question. I really like this one very much because it's very actual, I think. It's from Anthony, and he says, we have some legacy systems with old operating systems with no more security support. Does SecureSphere can help us preventing stuff like shell shock or heartbleed?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest use cases why our customers actually use SecureSphere is for legacy applications. Legacy applications for which they don't have code, they don't have any support for vulnerability fixes, and we do provide that, right? So you put SecureSphere in front of those applications, and we provide zero-day attack protection. So shell shock, for example, we can actually write immediate signatures within SecureSphere out of the box to actually protect applications behind SecureSphere or protected applications from shell shock or heartbleed kind of vulnerabilities. So that's a very simple use case. We talked about virtual patching as well, right? So virtual patching also fits into the whole protection for legacy applications because you can actually put a web application firewall in front, scan the specific web application, import those scan results, and automatically prove that you have actually found vulnerabilities and actually mitigated those vulnerabilities. So you can be rest assured that you can take these legacy applications and put them on the internet with a web application firewall protecting it. Yes, so we do support that use case.
That's good to know. Very good question, Dan. Very actually, as I said. A fourth one from Paul. Does SecureSphere works at web level only, or you can filter spam or phishing emails too?
So we are very focused on the web level, so we understand HTTP and HTTPS, and that's where our focus has been. Phishing, so from an email protocol level, we do not understand email, but we do have ways in which we can stop phishing attacks. One of the features that Carrie talked about was called a threat radar reputation. As a part of threat radar reputation, we also have something called a phishing feed. A phishing feed allows a web application that is protected by SecureSphere to identify if there are secondary web applications or malicious applications that are out in the wild, which are actually reaching back into the web application to take content out and actually mimic the web application. Essentially, that's what a phishing site does, right? It kind of tries to look and feel very similar to a banking site, right? So it's going to reach out to the original site to actually pick up images. We can actually detect that, and we can actually say, hey, I see a malicious site which is mimicking to be something like a banking site which I'm protecting, so I'm going to stop this specific malicious site from reaching back into this web application. As a result, I can also give a forensic study, so I can actually send an email back to, or an alert back to the security administrator saying, hey, there is a specific website which is actually reaching back into your banking application or any other application. Which looks and feels like your website, and it is a phishing website.
I see. And another question from a namesake of yours, Praveen, and is asking, I see SecureSphere uses CloudWatch. Is it possible to export logs manually or automatically on S3?
Could you repeat that question once more? I'm sorry, I didn't
hear
that.
It says, I see SecureSphere uses AWS CloudWatch. Is it possible to export logs manually or automatically on S3?
Automatically out of SecureSphere?
Automatically on S3. AWS S3, the storage system.
So yes, we do use CloudWatch, and CloudWatch is a mechanism which is very native to AWS. Like Carrie mentioned, it actually looks at what it does is it looks for the system performance. It looks for how well the system health of not only SecureSphere but also the application. So if it kind of figures out that SecureSphere is not performing at its optimal level because the application traffic has actually increased, what CloudWatch will do is it'll indicate back into the system to actually start off another instance of SecureSphere to go and handle that extra load. Now, from a logging perspective, AWS has got its own logging mechanism. We actually, from an alerting perspective, we can, the way we do it is we have a management server, so we alert based on system statuses. So we actually know exactly the number of gateways that are spun up, so you can actually find the status of the number of gateways that are spun up. But what we also do is we alert on security incidents that are local within AWS on a management console. So we have a management console that gets shipped along with as an AMI on AWS and actually captures all the logs. Now you have the ability to actually set up external logging or external alerting from SecureSphere into like a SIM device. So if you have a SIM device or a log management device on an AWS platform, you can actually push all those logs back into that SIM device. Anything that is supported from on-premise deployment perspective, we support it on AWS as well.
Is it also possible to export the threat logs or something like that?
Whether we actually export out the threat logs?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially we can actually capture a whole bunch of data, right? When we actually see attack happening on the web application, we capture essentially the whole HTTP request, right? So we look at the HTTP request and say, hey, this specific cookie or this specific value or parameter within the HTTP request have the attack parameter. So we actually capture that and we store it within our alerts. You have the option to actually take that exact HTTP logs and pass it off to an external device to actually do your forensics outside of SecureSphere if you want to do it. A lot of my customers actually use security alerts from SecureSphere alongside security alerts from other devices. It could be antivirus machines, it could be from IPS, IDS devices, or from firewalls, just to correlate the information so that they can identify a kind of attack or the attack trends within a log management system. So we enable that whole ecosystem.
I see. Just one more question out of the few that we still have, but we are definitely running out of time. This question is from Rec. Do you support other platforms like GCP, Azure, or OpenStack?
So when we looked at this space and we looked at the cloud, the first cloud opportunity that we looked at was AWS, right? And when you actually look at Gartner's recommendation on cloud, AWS is one of the biggest platforms, right? It's the five of the next infrastructure service platforms altogether do not make up what AWS is. So a lot of people are adopting AWS, and we want to make sure that we have our platform ready for AWS from a SecureSphere perspective, right? Eventually, we are going to get into new platforms like Azure and so on. So we've not started seeing a lot of traction in those new platforms, but we are going to invest our time into building support for those platforms. But apart from this, we do have other technology as well within our portfolio of products to actually go and support Azure and the other platforms from the cloud. So we do have cloud services that can enable you to protect your applications, which are on different platforms.
I see. Very good to know. Marek would be happy to hear that. Okay, Praveen, Kerry, thank you very much for your time. It has been a pleasure to be with you. It has been a great presentation and a great webinar. Thank you very much again for being here with us, and thank you. Just thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you all.
It has been a pleasure. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.